Okay, everyone. Hi, my name is Julie Garza. I'm the curator for Kings of the Lonestar, and I want to thank all of you for coming and sharing this experience with us. I also like to thank Mark Cervenka and the University of Houston for having us, and absolutely. And our moderator for this evening is Matt Zanzala. He is a hip hop promoter and journalist, and he's pretty much the busy man all around. And so we're very grateful to have him as our moderator for this evening. Before we get started, I'd like to show a short little film so you can be familiar with the artist's work.
We have got brothers from all over the state. We have Gems One, El Paso, Sloke representing Austin, Suffer representing San Antonio, Rat representing H-Town, and Mez from Austin as well. Now, like I said, I think a lot of people on the outside don't, when you think about Texas, graffiti is not the first thing that maybe comes to mind, but there's a strong culture throughout the state. Why don't we start here? Coming from El Paso, what were some of your earliest memories of this art form? Where did you first get the bug, start wanting to write?
I think El Paso is kind of a little bit even in a world of its own as well, because it's so far West Texas, it's like almost forgotten that it's in Texas sometimes. And I think just until maybe early 2000s, late 90s, it's starting to connect with the rest of Texas, which I'm super thankful for. But for some reason, the El Paso graffiti was always, I guess, like influenced by California. A lot of it, I think, has to do with the border. There has always been a lot of writers coming back and forth from Los Angeles back to El Paso, and definitely driven, I think, a lot of it by the Hispanic culture. And a lot of early El Paso graffiti. I know that you didn't want to really delve in too much to the history of graffiti as a whole, but just if I could just make a little side note, El Paso graffiti has always been influenced by gang graffiti, or placas if you want to call it. And the placas there in El Paso have been there for a long, long time. I mean, we're talking like 50s, 40s, all that stuff. I mean, so far back, even before spray paint was, all right, they were doing placas with paint, literally. A lot of that just, that's where we get a lot of our influence from. Now, I even though I love that, I'm starting to see that there is a, there's other influences coming now and stuff like that. And I think especially like getting connected with the rest of Texas has helped that tremendously. I mean, there's some amazing artists coming out of all these cities that are represented here. But I do think like my earliest personal memories of like where graffiti came, what I was influenced by was that Mexican gang graffiti. We called it tag banging. I really didn't know anything outside of that other than what we called tag banging, which is what you would normally see in like the hoods, like in LA or, in certain parts of El Paso too, but like the Mexican gang graffiti. And that's where I personally started, being in a little gang as a little kid and just doing that kind of graffiti, you know what I mean? So that's my earliest memories as far as graffiti in my own city in El Paso.
Watch closely. This wall has just been painted with super chemtone. Now watch this decorating magic. You're watching the most sensational achievement the decorating world has ever known. Now, for the first time, you can actually roll a new kind of beauty onto your walls. It's called applique, and it's rolled over walls freshly painted with super chemtone. More than mere design, applique rolled over super chemtone gives you new dimension effects that will completely transform your rooms. The effects can be subtle, or bold, soft, or shimmering. They can actually change with the light in your room. You begin with America's favorite latex wall paint, super chemtone, whatever color you want. And then when it's dry, an hour later or at any time within 3 days, you're ready for applique. The secret of applying it is this double roller. You simply dip it in the applique and roll on this exciting new kind of beauty. You can't compare it with anything you've ever seen before because there's never been anything like it. Applique rolled over super chemtone is the fashionable new way to make the rooms in your home more beautiful than you ever thought possible. You paint your walls, roll on this new dimension beauty, and get a whole new room for little more than the cost of paint. See your super chemtone dealer tomorrow. See the thousands of effects in color and design you can achieve with applique, rolled over super chemtone. Then you too will want this beauty in your home. Fabulous new applique, rolled over America's favorite washable wall paint, super chemtone.
There's definitely a lot of history represented here at this table, and there's also a lot of people not represented at this table because each city definitely has their own history and legends. For me, it was Beach Street, 1984. I saw the graffiti on the subway cars, and I'd been drawing since I was a kid, but I saw the graffiti and I said, man, that's where it's at. Later on, it was through skateboarding. Me and my friends would go skate in ditches and stuff around town, and wherever there's tunnels and other walls, there's usually graffiti, and that's where I was first exposed to the likes of Scam, Tanner, Rage, Sec, and through skateboarding, I got into tagging. We were also influenced by Bones Brigade, Vato Rat, all that stuff, which is mainly Venice, LA, once again, whole Cholo style. But when I saw Style Wars for the first time in 1990, man, my world changed. So definitely East Coast influence at first, and it's been on ever since then.
Hi, I'm Johnny Bench, and this is Johnny Bench's bench. Now I'm going to paint it with Krylon spray paint.
Krylon's easy to use, goes on smoothly. It even helps prevent rust. Watch Krylon versus the other leading national brand. The other brand runs. But Krylon's special quick-dry formula helps avoid runs and drips for a smooth, professional finish. How'd it turn out, Johnny?
No runs, no drips, no errors.
Krylon, for the do-it-yourself professional.
But, like Sloke and Suffer, I got into breakdancing, or I did, and I got into the breaking movies and saw graffiti. And then once I got into college, I kind of lost control and started hitting trains. And I think it was in '94, they had the Houston Hip Hop Festival, and that basically brought all of the Houston graffiti writers together. When I first met Gonzo, Color, DTS, all the crews, and took it upon myself to basically unite Houston with the Houston Writers Bench. And everybody in here knows what's going on with that, and that's a really big deal to get the writers together. But you guys will see a lot of Houston tomorrow at the show and on Sunday when we paint.
Was it the writer's bench that NBK came up for back in the day? Was that like 95? I remember you guys came up and did a big wall here. That was, like everybody came up. That was 95. Was that a writer's bench event?
Well, there was the Writers Bench actual event where all the Houston writers would actually meet every Friday. I think it was beginning of the month. It's been so long. And we met at the Water Wall in the Galleria area, and then also downtown. And all the Houston writers would get together and share their flicks. It's basically how we all got to know each other.
Sure. Mez?
Yeah. So I first recollect graffiti with like stoner graffiti, like mushrooms and pot leaves. And actually the first thing that I ever saw that really struck me was a graffiti of Eddie from Iron Maiden. I just thought that was like the coolest ever. And then of course,
you were right.
Yeah,
You're right.
I've never seen anything surpass it to this day. But that was like mid 80s. And then, the same sort of stuff, Beat Street and, hip hop started to come around, and I started seeing it through that and was really drawn to it that way. I'm from a suburban Caucasian environment, so my peer group necessarily wasn't really onto any of that stuff. So it was all through my own sort of searching. I would get like the Source magazine, and Chino had a little graffiti section in there, and I would like. That was the only reason that was the only reason I got that magazine, was for that little, graffiti. Yeah. And then 12 ounce and volume 1 and, all those.
On the go.
On the go, yeah. So, so I started to dive into it, by myself through those sort of means, and kind of practice and play with it. And then, I started discovering like MBK, and then like the Midwest guys, ATT and DF and all that stuff. And, of course, the LA people, CBS and all that sort of stuff. And that was just where it took off for me.
Sure. Now, you guys are, you brought up tag banging. Now, when I'd watch movies like Style Wars, it was all about competition in the streets. These guys trying to get up as much as possible. What was the competitive element like here in Texas? Is this a pretty competitive community?
I would say I'm probably second, third generation Austin graffiti. And the first generation, hence, the mid, late 80s, the whole Beach Street, second wave of hip hop from the East Coast, New York, was really strong. And then it went the way of gangbanging. And when I got into it, graffiti was pretty dead in Austin. And it was mainly gang tags. And that was mainly East, South Austin. And so I was kind of a loner. I mean, me and my buddy, he rode dice. We were, as far as I know, the first riders from West Austin. And so it was a playground. I mean, we had the whole city to ourselves. Now, of course, it was less people to paint with, but at the same time, more spots to paint. When MBK came around in '95, I moved to SF and then came back, started MBK with Saint back in late '94. Graffiti was starting to catch on in Austin again. And there was a crew that wrote MSK. And it was all about bombing and battling. I mean, it was very competitive.
Yeah.
It was, you're a toy and you suck and we're going to crush you. And that's what we did. We battled. Now, you have to remember that's a small scene.
Yeah.
Now, compared to other cities such as LA, Chicago, New York, we didn't have hundreds of riders. I would say at that time there was maybe 30, you know, and of course people would dabble with it, but we made it a point to be known that we were a force to be reckoned with. And if you were going to paint near our spots, which were all illegal, you would get dealt with. I mean, let's face it, I mean, graffiti comes from the streets. I mean, if you don't come with it, you're going to be put in check.
Iron Mike on rust.
I hate rust.
Iron Mike on tough.
This is tough. Rust tough. This is rust. Oleum? The dictionary defines tough as strong, not easily influenced, like me. The definition of oleum is, we sprayed this rusty metal plate with fast-drying rust tough, exposed the rusted metal, then placed it in the torture salt fog chamber. The rust didn't spread, it stayed tough. You want tough? What do you want? Oleum. Got rust, get tough.
Yes, Houston, very competitive.
Yeah.
A lot of tagging. I believe the first king of tagging was Berserk, DTS, and then we know who took his crown. That was Next. Yeah, it was a lot of bombing back then in Houston. I think a lot of the guys like myself and my crew, we stuck to the freights to do pieces. But of course, because it was so competitive, I had to do a heaven, which got me busted and in jail. So the competitiveness led us to do these things.
You want to tell them what a heaven is?
Oh yeah, heaven is a green sign, the freeway green
Yeah.
sign. Yeah. So, yeah, that was like, but when I got out, it drove me to just go crazy again. You know, because it kind of makes you, and I think most of the guys here would feel like when you do finally get that time, when you're spending the night there, it's like your badge of honor as a graffiti artist.
Man.
So, yeah, it was pretty rough, but like Houston is definitely very competitive, and I think, you know, thanks to people like Gonzo, who gave the Wall of Fame to the riders in Houston, that's where everybody flexed their skills. And I personally, every time I hit a train, I was always battling with my crew members every night to see whose piece was better. It was a battle every night when we went out.
This is artwork from News, who is one of the featured artists in Kings of the Lonestar exhibition. Pretty killer, huh?
So we started to hear kind of like maybe very late 80s, early 90s of people starting to do this thing called tagging, and there was tagging crews, and it was just very, very strange, and it sounded like one of those fad things you hear about once in a while, you know, like I don't know if they had it here, but they had like party crews and stuff. And so it kind of sounded like that, like tagging crews. Like, well, what is that? Well, what do you guys represent? Well, we just do graffiti. Okay, what do you guys like slang? What do you guys do? You know, it was just like real weird. Like all they did was just graffiti. And so there was a lot of amazing, like really, really amazing graffiti writers that came around. I think people from LA actually jump-started the graffiti scene in El Paso. People like Euler. Amazing, and probably nobody here will know the crews that I'm talking about, but it's El Paso history. You know, crews like CTS, UK, CMD. These dudes are all amazing artists that came out of those crews. Are doing other things now as artists, you know, comic book illustrators and different stuff like that. But yeah, it just it was super competitive. It still is to this day, and it's almost like El Paso graffiti can be marked by its battles. Like there's certain crews that have, well, the early '90s. Oh, that's when UK and CMD battled, or 2000s. That's when I really don't want to get into all that, but because some of that stuff is still relevant to right now. Yeah, there's definitely super competitive nature, and on El Paso it tends to have graffiti. I mean, it tends to have like more of a gang feel to it, to be honest with you.
And was that like a goal of yours to get up all over Texas? Was
Worldwide.
part of it? Yeah,
I
worldwide.
mean, first all city, then all Texas, and then all country, and then worldwide. I mean, that's what I think
Right.
we're all still doing to this day.
Right.
I mean, whether we bomb still or not, we're still getting up wherever
Mm-hmm.
we go.
Right. Well, can you elaborate, before you pass the mic, can you elaborate a little bit on the differences between, like you said, you were influenced by East Coast, or you saw the East Coast and then you went to the West Coast and saw something totally different. What were some of those differences?
And this is my opinion here,
And if anyone,
everybody was influenced by New York, hands down. I mean, whether it was the Cholos, from LA, because LA, of course, and the Southwest have their own history. But New York is considered the mecca of graffiti art. And the West Coast were influenced by that at first, but really made a point to create their own style. The techniques, man. The lettering styles, the techniques, I mean, hex, airbrush techniques. I mean, I'd never seen shading like that, hex, even to this day. Yeah, and really to stand apart from New York. And I think that's the beauty, just like any other art form, is once you learn the blueprint, I mean, that's the way I was taught. It was like, here's the blueprint, now what are you going to do with it? Do you want to look like everyone else, or do you want to stand apart with your own style?
I've heard that there's maybe a little more of a tolerance for painting trains now, or has it become like,
It's a felony now, so
it's a felony now?
Yes, so that's why you're not going to see a lot of that going on anymore.
Well, no, I mean, I feel like I see a lot of it now, though.
Well, I'm sure the younger kids aren't
Yeah.
going to care. Obviously, they're
Yeah.
they're going to get up. Yeah.
Yeah.
It really varies on where you're at, too.
Right.
Like, I know people in different places that have yards where as long as they're cool, the bulls are cool, but I know of a lot more places it's like no-go, like places that you could do in the early 2000s or 90s now because of the popularity and because of toys and shit like that. Now you're super screwed. So I think it all just really depends. I think, there are some spots where it's kind of lenient, there's little tricks that certain people know to do to keep the train workers from getting pissed off and stuff like that. But
They say not to cover the numbers. and
yeah,
things like
don't
that.
cover the numbers and yeah. So, so there's just, so I really think that it's not a blanket, it's easier because you see more. I think
Right.
there's a lot of reasons. Like I said, I know that there's some yards that exist where, the people have been going there for a while, so it's kind of cool. But from what I can see, and I'm not a big train guy, but from what I know is like a lot of the yards are locked down more than they ever were before.
What would you consider like your biggest piece or your biggest moment in this, whether it was a legal thing or a legit thing or something what would you say was one of your most defining moments, if you want to look back to that?
Mine was actually the Armadillo magazine. Really not actually having to do anything about getting up or showing what I could do or the freights. It was about showcasing all of the other Texas graffiti writers. That was my big moment, is to, giving other Texas graffiti writers knowledge of other writers in the state and seeing their work.
I don't know. I've been able to travel, but being a writer and traveling somewhere is completely different. It's a whole different vacation. There's but you get to see like what most tourists won't see in the city. You get to see every single nook and cranny and what's good, what's not, and you get to paint and meet the most random person, and then you're gonna spend the next day or two with them painting legally or illegally, and so that's a whole other ball game right there.
Hi, how are you?
Good to see you. Anything to say to the people?
Excuse me?
Anything to say to the crew, the people that are watching this?
Thank you for all your support, for coming out, and I hope you enjoy the show.
I went above ground because I kept going to jail for graffiti.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the truth. I mean, I did 3 stints in county over graffiti, and the judge told me next time I catch you, you're doing a year flat. And I thought, well, all I do in jail is draw graffiti, so, I mean, how am I going to make this art form work for me? You know, I mean, I started on the streets, but the truth is the streets never paid my bills. And I started getting older, too. So about 2002, I made a decision to go above ground and start doing commission work. And that's led to an interesting journey. Like, you know, Suffer said, traveling the world, painting, you know, and meeting the people you meet. You know, I was in Europe and they didn't speak English and I didn't speak French, but graffiti is what united us, you know. Next thing you know, I'm hanging with the locals and painting with them. These days, making a living off art, it's not as glamorous as it sounds. It's a hustle, like anything else, but it's a lot of hard work. And I think I was actually having this conversation with Sona on the phone driving up here. I think it takes a lot of courage and determination to pursue a career in the arts.
Don't tell no man shit.
I just thought it was a very pivotal point for hip-hop culture when you could take rap music with you on the go. And it wasn't just for people's bedrooms or club scenarios. You could then play what you wanted to play anywhere at any time. And that really helped spread what rap music was, which helped spread what hip-hop culture was, and in turn tied into graffiti. So that old school b-boy look of having the boombox with you, or that LL Cool J look, can't live without my radio, that was all well established in hip hop circles before LL Cool J couldn't live without his radio. So I started collecting them one day when I was like, yo, where are they? They had to have gone somewhere. I went to Mexico and I saw some in a little flea market. And I didn't buy them then because I was young and couldn't afford them. But I knew that electronics didn't go to Mexico to die. If anything, they flourished there. They made different boomboxes with little disco balls and lights and surround sound systems, and you know, that's where it went.
I know it's Saturday night, there's probably something way cooler to do, so I'm glad everybody's here. Everybody's well dressed and it's a fun night.
Cool. Some really great artists here. Yeah, I like how it's mixed with graffiti art and like real illustrating art.
Hey, this is Rat, a old school HDF Houston.
Oh, shit!
Now, you know, the average person, as you guys are well aware, they don't have a clue. the difference between tagging and anything else. They don't know what it is you guys do exactly. And I wanted to just in general talk to you a little bit about kind of the rules in this game. Like, and I think there's maybe rules isn't the exact word for it, but some of like, you know, it's not just a bunch of dudes running around painting on a wall, you know, or throwing a tag up or whatever. There's a lot more to it. Could we maybe touch upon some of the aspects of this culture that like you guys really hold near and dear, that's really important to you, as far as, you know, some that, you know, telling some of the young people in this room?
So like the big one is you never ride on a church. You know, that's just overall to any church, any denomination, whatever. You know, you don't want to ride on a school, probably like a mom and pop, you know, shop or whatever. You don't want to do that. And we would target, you know, the big corporations and, you know, the city walls and the vacant structures, and that goes to the broken windows theory and all that. But we followed guidelines to a signature as a tag, and you could go over that with like a throw up, which is, you know, fast bubble letters. They're usually two colors, black and chrome, black and white, or something like that, real solid. And after that, you go over it with the small like burner. You use like 7, 8, 9 colors and completely cover that. And so there were specific rules, you know, if Sloke, you know, if he got that spot up there when everybody was asleep, he went up there at night and painted that, I couldn't come back in the morning and paint that. It's like a big no-no.